Okay, so chapter 8 is, and I like this image. I think it's important because we see that it's no longer TJ Eckelberg's eyes that go over the city, but it's sort of like a parallel image. And we have the women's eyes because what is it that Eckelberg sees? That's kind of a question that a lot of people ask. Why the symbolism of the eyes as the God figure? What is he looking at? And now Myrtle, that she has died. There's sort of this angelic image of Myrtle looking down, but then the eyes are looking up. And so a lot of people have kind of looked over this imagery and thought that it was symbolic of the women, that the only hope that they have is not in this life, but it's in the afterlife or something beyond this, because they will never cease to be objectified and abused. So that's one interpretation. So Nick has a problem sleeping. He says, I'm half sick between grotesque reality and savage, frightening dreams. He's stuck between all of these messed up people. Nick's nightmares are just as brutal as reality. It points to the savagery of the society that he's living in. He's getting disgusted with the events that he's begun to witness in Daisy, in Tom, in Gatsby. He has like this restlessness that's in him. In Gatsby's house, the piano is ghostly. There's dust everywhere. The rooms are musty as though they haven't been aired for many days. The house seems to collapse and go into disrepair, along with Gatsby's dreams. He no longer needed to lure Daisy, and everything is forgotten. His entire purpose for his drive and his motivation for finding wealth, for buying the home, for opening the home, for every detail down to the authentic books and the shirts, signify what Gatsby had hoped for. And now that it's gone, he has nothing left. He's too sensitive for this cruel world. It says Jay Gatsby had broken up like glass against Tom's hard malice. He's fragile, he's sensitive, he's romantic at heart. Tom and Daisy are cruel, selfish, and destructive. Tom is brutal and intimidating and physical, and Gatsby can't compete. So not only is he rejected, but Tom lures Daisy and her weakness to money back to him, and Gatsby is left completely alone and abandoned. Gatsby describes Daisy as the first nice girl he'd ever met, suggesting that he had previous relationships with women, maybe that had a bad reputation or they were of a lower social status. Daisy's house was full of ripe mystery, radiant activities, romances that weren't musty, and the fresh breathing and redolent of this year's shining motor cars and of dances whose flowers were scarcely withered. Everything surrounding Daisy was alive and fresh and full of promise and potential. He sought a new life and new identity entirely in her, and when that's rejected, his life went out of him. The fact that Daisy had many lovers and suitors excited Gatsby. It made her worth the pursuit. He felt their presence was all about the house and pervading the air with the shades and echoes and still vibrant emotions. So to win an admired and fickle woman like Daisy would truly be a feat. And we see now that maybe it wasn't even about Daisy, but it was about becoming something that she would love, and he lost. And so we get this sort of dreamlike image of Gatsby and Daisy that is from an older production of the film. The thing that attracted Daisy to Gatsby was his uniform, and Gatsby was afraid that the charm wouldn't last. So he made the most of his time, and he took what he could get ravenously and unscrupulously. At first he didn't seem to have feelings for Daisy. He merely wanted to see if he could succeed in seducing someone out of his reach. He never expected to fall in love with her. That's what a lot of scholars claim, that it wasn't really authentic. But we're beginning to see, remember that fragmented person that is Jay Gatsby? And it seems that when Daisy's with him, the pieces are united. Kind of the hometown, like the feeling-oriented young man that he was at the beginning, the one with ambition and aspiration in life, is now paired with the wealthy Gatsby. But when Daisy leaves him, he's broken again. There was a sense of guilt early on in the relationship, since Gatsby had taken Daisy under false pretenses and given her a false sense of security, letting her believe that they were of the same social class. He had intended to take what he could get and go, but now he found that he had committed himself to the following of a Grail. He couldn't live up to what he promised to be, and she realizes it's just all a facade. And so she rejects him. She vanishes into her house and leaves him with nothing. She has her own life, and Gatsby is rejected. Perhaps not used to rejection, he pursues Daisy not because he loves her, but because he bruised his ego, maybe, perhaps. Um, Maybe it's because he believes if he works hard enough, he can get anything he wants. And so, like a moth, he's attracted to her status and her wealth, and he pursues her precisely because he shouldn't. For Gatsby, Daisy represented not only the American dream, but also the eternal past and a sense of eternal youth, because his vision of them together is from a point of the past and not of the present or even looking toward the future. After Gatsby left, Daisy became nervous, full of despair. She was pressured by the world to fill a certain role. She began to move again, restless, and caused her to see other men and dress in finery and stay out all night, and she couldn't wait for him forever. She wanted her life shaped now, immediately, and the decision must be made by some force of love or of money or of unquestionable practicality. Tom was the force that happened to decide for her, and at the right place and the right time. She would have taken anybody that was willing to push her into it, and that was one of the things that Tom offers. So Gatsby comes back for Daisy, but she's gone. Tom and Daisy leave, and he snatched out his hand desperately as if to snatch only a wisp of air and to save a fragment of the spot that she had made lovely for him. But it was all going by too fast for his blurred eyes, and he knew that he had lost a part of it, the freshest and best forever. He looks for her. He thinks that maybe he can get her back if he tries hard enough. And part of him realizes that he can't, that they will forever be separated. So Nick gives his opinion of Gatsby in these final chapters. And he says they're a rotten crowd. You're worth the whole darn bunch put together. Even though Gatsby's a criminal, Nick sees him as a purer being than the Buchanans and Jordan and everyone who came to Gatsby's parties, because they were all corrupt and destructive and exploitative. And at least Gatsby, he was generous with his feelings, he was generous with his materials, even though his motives were selfish and petty and snobby and dangerous. That was the other, but even though his feelings were selfish, it was driven by something that was, at least in some respects, pure, which was love. Gatsby can love while the others are reckless, lack emotional attachments, and are concerned only with artifice and surfaces. And those are the last words that Nick speaks to Gatsby. And they elicit one of Gatsby's radiant and rare smiles. So Nick comes to like and approve of Gatsby at the end for his purity and his goodness. Not sure what that is. So Myrtle she always wanted to be famous. She always wanted to make something of herself. She talked about that when we were in that party scene at the beginning. Remember, she bought the magazines that had to do with like the gossip and popular individuals, and it was a tragic achievement that landed her in the paper. George is distraught at the death of Myrtle. His wife was everything to him, and he sought vengeance. He assumed that Gatsby was Myrtle's lover, and he was the man responsible for her death. This is, again, the eyes of T.J. Eckelberg. George compares the eyes of the billboard with the eyes of God, always watching the sinners of the earth. And he tells Myrtle that she can't fool God in her affair, even though she had managed to fool him for a while. In the society, God is money and business and material goods. So Gatsby is at his house in his pool, taking a swim for the first time before it gets drained for the winter. He's waiting for Daisy to call him, and he knows likely that she'll never call. I have an idea that Gatsby himself didn't believe it would come, and perhaps he no longer cared. If that was true, he must have felt that he had lost the old warm world, paid a high price for living too long with a single dream. He must have looked up at an unfamiliar sky through frightening leaves and shivered as he found what a grotesque thing a rose is, and how raw the sunlight was upon the scarcely created grass. A new world, material without being real, where poor ghosts breathing dreams like air drifted fortuitously about like that ashen, fantastic figure gliding toward him through the amorphous trees. So again, he's lost everything, his entire identity. He has no idea who he is. It's describing this new world where grass is starting to grow and roses have harsh thorns. And in his last moments, they're full of this sense of resignation and disappointment. He realizes the futility of his dream. He doesn't recognize the world. It doesn't match the ideal he's created in his head. What was once beautiful and peaceful is now grotesque and frightening. He sees the world for what it is, a savage nature covered by an artificial cloak of pleasure and beauty. His world is filled with brutality, rawness, unfulfilled dying dreams. And as both characters are disappointed with life and fate, he dies. Wilson murders Gatsby and then commits suicide. And Nick describes the movement of the water, the gusts of the wind, the leaves that revolve along the blood of Gatsby and the passage juxtaposes the life of the world with the death of Gatsby and the insignificance of man. The world will move on. There's more money to be made. And a man's life is snuffed out. The movement of nature is kind of symbolic in this respect to safety. It evokes that the Buchanan's house is now going to be empty. They're going to move on. They left Chicago because of Tom's affair. They're leaving New York because of the tragedy. Gatsby slowed down. He didn't move. He rested. He gave up. He stopped. He took a dip in his pool, and then the world caught up with him and destroyed him. There's safety in moving, in emotion, in striving, in perpetually attempting to move beyond what you currently have. There's emotional and physical safety, and there's no time to dwell on the past. And that was kind of the message from chapter 8.